Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Standout Podcast. I am returning with my friend Landon, and today our topic is going to be power. Now, I don't mean power as in the force or magic, I mean power as in the authority that people have over others, be that as a government leader or a project manager or anything in between. So we want to talk today about power, uh, the dangers that it can come with, and also sort of related to that, good leadership versus bad leadership, and then leading by example. I hope you guys enjoy the discussion today. So, like I said, power, talking about the authority. Now, what comes to mind, of course, is government leaders. Take the United States of America, for example. President, Congress, whatever, they have sort of authority over us. Even though we live in a mostly free nation, there is still the authority of a government to help regulate that. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate on how good the government does at their job, but that is why the government is in place, is to regulate laws to keep peace among its people. With all positions of power, there can be a misuse of that power or even an abuse of that, as we might see through tyrants and oppressive leaders. Like all things, power in itself is not inherently bad. However, evil people might use it for, um, for evil. Landon, do you have any
Just
thoughts?
like just like Uncle Ben said in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
I still don't like how they did Aunt May like that, this newest one, but whatever. Adam, have you seen any examples of power that have been misused or abused or taken away for that matter?
Well, yes. Throughout the Old Testament, especially in the book of First and Second Kings, and let me see, yeah, First and Second Kings, you see a lot of examples of good and bad leaders of the kingdom of Israel. Most of them were bad leaders or bad kings. They had power given to them. We know from the history of Israel that it was given to them by God, and they really did a poor job of using that power. They were tyrants, they were oppressive, they gave themselves over to pagan gods, religions, and both kingdoms, North and the South Kingdom, were ultimately destroyed, even though a remnant of Judah was allowed to return. So, especially in the reigns of like King Manasseh and Ahaz, they were really, really bad leaders and definitely were abusing the power that they had been given. So that's one example. Another more recent historical example could be uh, the events around World War II. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, those guys, they were leaders of a country, very powerful countries, and they were abusing their power. They were tyrants, uh, murderous. They were, some have to question their sanity, even. They definitely abused their power as well. Just a few examples in history of tyrannical leaders.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, would you mind explaining to everybody what gives somebody power? Is it the social position, the wealth position, the hierarchy position, um, maybe even character? What gives somebody power?
To put it in fairly simple terms, I think power is mostly just other people's perception of you as a person. Granted, there are several factors that can sort of clue you in as to the nature of that person and also the status of that person. take a king, for example, sitting on a throne, on a, dressed like a king, guards. It can lead to the proper perception of that king, and his subjects would see that he has power.
So what you're saying is when we think of power, we're thinking of the boss,
Yeah,
the
basically.
guy in charge. Would you say that it doesn't always have to be that way, though? I know I've seen situations where it's not the guy who you think is in charge, but the quiet guy in the corner might have more power than the loud guy in the middle.
I would definitely agree. It's not always who you think it is who has the power, the authority over you. Again, it just kind of goes with perception. Let's take that example. You take the loud guy in the middle, and he may seem like a boss. He may act like he's the boss and command people like he is, but the quiet guy in the corner could very easily be the leader in that group because how he leads, how he is perceived by those who follow him.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, okay, I got another question. So let's go with biblical terms here. In biblical terms, how do we see power as Christians? How do we see it, process it, respond to it, all that good stuff?
We read in Romans 13, let me see, is chapter 13, verse 2. Verse 1. It says, "There is no authority except from God. The authorities that exist are appointed by God." So what that's saying is all authority comes from God. So when, as Christians, what we're supposed to do is respect the authorities, righteous or wicked. We have to respect them and obey the laws that they've given us. In short, we're obeying them because their authority comes from God. So by obeying them, we are obeying God. Now, to obey a law that would directly conflict with what God has commanded us through the Bible, that would be disobedience. But we must respect the authorities and respond appropriately, respond respectfully, even compassionately, even on those that we don't like.
Okay, yeah, so just making sure that we stay within biblical terms when we are respecting power at hand. So we've kind of talked about a large scale power here, thinking like presidents or governments or stuff, but how can we see power in some of our smaller communities, maybe like a church or, like your town or something like that? How does power affect that? And by extension, how does power affect the individual person?
I think it kind of plays out in man's natural desire to follow somebody. It just comes down to the core of man. We seek someone to follow. We look up to somebody. That's why we have childhood heroes or certain people that we go to for advice. We want to follow somebody. That's just human nature. So power plays out when someone decides they're going to step up and act as a leader, and people go to them, people listen to them, to what they have to say. It could be an elected official or just an unelected person who is stepping into a role of leadership. It doesn't have to just be government. It can just be a well-known and respected person in the community or your church. And it isn't limited to just pastors or government leaders. It can just be your everyday person. Like I was saying, it just goes down to the core of human nature, just our need to follow somebody, our need to look to someone who can lead us, direct us, and partly why that's partly why people are able to step up into a leadership role without being elected or voted in. It's because people are looking for a leader. People are looking for someone who is strong enough and smart enough to direct them. So I guess power plays out in communities just when somebody takes that initiative and steps up into leadership.
Yeah, that all sounds really good, but obviously there's good leaders, there's bad leaders, there's people who use power in the right way, and there's people who abuse it. So, how do we make sure that if we do have some level of power, because let's just make this clear, power is any type of position that puts you in a higher social status, or let's say you have like a hook on somebody, you have power over them, anything that gives you an advantage over another person. So how can we use this for good?
Really, it just comes down to Christian conduct. We're supposed to live in a manner that imitates Christ. As Paul says somewhere in 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 11, imitate me as I imitate Christ. That is what a good leader is supposed to do. A good Christian leader, they're supposed to imitate Christ so that those who follow them can see their example and also imitate Christ. Really, it's being a good leader is just the Christian life in with slightly, well, I should say slightly. It's the Christian life with higher responsibilities as a leader because people will follow you, and if you are well respected enough, people might just take what you have to say for granted. They may not they may not fact check it like in the Bible or with other sources because they trust it from your mouth. So there's a responsibility there to not lead people astray. And as we're told in the Bible, those who lead others astray will have to answer for that when they stand before God one day. So really, it's just living in a Christ-like manner. And as we see throughout the Gospels, especially in the Gospel of John, Jesus is a leader. He's not the typical leader. Somewhere in the Bible, in the Gospels, I don't remember the exact reference. The people were amazed at Jesus' teaching because he taught like nobody else before him had. People looked to him as a leader of sorts, and even in the months before his crucifixion, they were trying to exalt him as a physical king who would overthrow Rome. So he was a leader to them. But as we see in John chapter 13, Jesus was not a physical leader in that sense. He was a servant leader. He washed the apostles' feet at the Last Supper. That was not something that a leader did. That was delegated to a servant or a slave to wash people's feet. Jesus was leading by example, humbling himself in his leadership. So that is what we should do. As we imitate Christ, we should be humbling ourselves as a leader instead of exalting ourselves, as is the manner of a worldly leader.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So, with that being said, a good leader living in a Christ like manner, there are certain qualities that they should have as a leader. Now, these aren't exactly anything that call them normal Christians that they should not have, but definitely needs to be seen in a leader of other Christians, not just pastors. It can be the well-respected person in your church. And I think a good list, not everything a good leader should have, but a good list of qualities they should have can be found in 2 Peter chapter 1, specifically verses 5 through 7, which says, but also for this very reason, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. Again, this is not just directed at leaders, this is directed at all Christians. However, I feel like it is very important for a Christian leader to have these things within him. And it really just goes down to practicality. You have to be a faithful Christian to be a Christian leader. You have to have integrity, honor. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know when to talk, when to be quiet, when to let someone else lead. And you have to be compassionate. You have to be loving to others. So these things are good qualities for leaders to have and should not take them lightly. And this just goes back to the imitation of Christ. Uh, he has given us the example. We should live by that example. We should try to imitate him to the best of our ability. All right. So, Landon, in leaders that you have seen or read about, what are the defining qualities that separate a good leader from a bad leader? They can be Christian or non-Christian.
Okay, so a couple main ones. I think one of the biggest ones is just kindness. Being able to help somebody regardless of how it impacts you. I think another good one is respect, and I don't mean that in a there's a higher power, because obviously it's important to have respect for God, regardless of who you are, but respect for other people, other things. There's always going to be a bigger fish in the pond, and having respect for yourself. I know there's some things that, like, when you read about different large leaders throughout history, they have a very high respect for themselves, and that's not a bragging respect. That's a making sure that they don't do bad stuff respect. And I think the last thing that I would say a lot of great leaders have in the Bible and in other events is they have an overarching goal of goodness. And what that means is they have something that sounds basic in concept, but it's harder to execute than just a simple goal would be, such as maybe their simple goal would be to raise their company by 10% the next year, while their overarching goal is to create a sustainable world. So maybe their company is like an electric car company or something like that. That's just an example. I don't think there's anybody who actually fits that, but they do have a goal or a vision for how they want to impact everybody with their life. And also, that goes without saying that you need to have God at the forefront of that. He's going to give you his vision for your life and what you need to do.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good. So just a broad vision of what they should do, what they're uh, looking to do with their leadership and their followers. Is that right?
Yeah, so the three I had were kindness, respect, and a vision.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. In my own life, what I've seen in a good leader versus a bad leader is how much they manage their followers. Uh, Now, it goes to both sides of the scale, either extreme micromanagement or just total laziness in regards to their followers. And then, like, right in the middle, it's that perfect match of like micromanagement, but also independence in people who follow them. If you're in that leadership position, I know for a fact it's very hard to go to just slide between, to be very micromanaging and just like carefree, like just do what you want. I have no business with this. Um, but in the really good leaders that I've seen, they know when and where to micromanage and to leave the followers or the current workers by themselves, let them do it independently. And it's that perfect match between just letting people do it and then showing them how to do it and helping them. I'll use the example, the famous quote: you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. So at some point, there is that micromanagement in that leadership, just that showing other people how to do the work, how to do what they're supposed to do. And then eventually you can leave them to do the work independently by themselves, possibly without even needing you at all. you can just go back to a more, don't want to say distant, but not as overarching or micromanaging of the position. So there's a teaching factor, and then there's also uh, just like a independent learning as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just knowing your people, honestly. So we've gone over kind of like what it means to be a good leader and what a bad leader is and how this all fits in with your life. But let's talk about the different types of authority a leader can have. Adam, I know you were talking about this the other day, and you were very excited to explain this. I'm going to go ahead and let you take the reins on this one.
Yeah, so as we talk about power, the overarching issue comes up, and that is the issue that man has with power. You see, man is a paradoxical creature. We look for somebody to lead us, and at the same time, we often despise those who lead us. Uh, like I said, it's a paradox. So, like I said, we seek a leader, and then we find that leader. If they're not the exactly perfect person in that leadership role, we don't like that leader. And that's why we can't be a perfect leader. We're still fallen human beings. But if we are living in a way that imitates Christ, uh, even and we repent of our sins when we do commit sin, we can be a good leader for other people. And another quality in leaders that separates the good from the bad is usually the mentality of do as I say, not what I do, rather than do as I do. Now, the do as I do mentality is more commonly in line with imitating Christ. Uh, as we see in John chapter 13, Jesus has given us the example, so we follow his example, that those who follow us might also imitate his example. Um, and also discussion of power, there comes the discussion of uh, anarchy and hierarchy. Anarchy being the absence of a leader or of an authority, and a hierarchy with a set line of authority. Now, on paper, it doesn't seem like the hierarchy is a good idea that gives a person in power over all, uh, maybe held in check by certain factors or other government leaders. As we see in the United States, the president is technically at the top of the hierarchy, but there are plenty of factors under him that help keep him in check so that he is not in absolute authority. And however much people may dislike the idea of a hierarchy, it is indeed a biblical concept. We see that all throughout the uh, first few books of the Bible, but we see it mostly come out in Exodus and Deuteronomy for the first time, where God says he will be the king over his people, where he starts referring to the Israelites, descendants of Abraham, as his people and the authority that he has over them. We also read the latter chapters of Deuteronomy that God knows the children of Israel will try to set up a king, even though they have God as their king. Now, the term king is used very distinctly, and it is clear that a hierarchy of sorts is in play here. So, the hierarchy is a biblical concept, and as much as people may not like a hierarchy, be that a monarchy or a democracy like America, it's better than total anarchy, the absence of a leader, the absence of authority. Because whether we like it or not, God is the king of our lives. It's just whether or not we will subject to his authority and power.
Yeah. Hey, I do want to go back to one thing you said. You were talking about the do what I say, not what I do mentality. And use Jesus as an example. And while, yes, we do need to try to be as Christ-like as possible, there's also an understanding that you're not going to be dying for the sins of the world. You're not perfect. You're not Jesus. So there are boundaries that you need to set to make sure you're not thinking of yourself in the sense of a god, in which case you are making yourself an idol, and that would be idolization. So you need to be very careful as to how you phrase that. There's also, I know I've seen it this way. There's two different types of main leaders that I've seen. There's the lead by example, and they're kind of the big leaders who are there. They're gonna they're gonna go for the long call. And then there's some short-term leaders who are going, they're gonna get stuff done, and they're gonna make sure everything stays on track. But they aren't the type of leader who is exactly popular.
Yeah, excellent points. Yeah, definitely don't want to give you the wrong idea of following Jesus' example. When I say that, I mean the qualities, the characteristics that he exemplifies in his ministry, his compassion, his kindness, humility, uh, also his initiative and willingness to do the work, not dying on the cross for sins of the world, not forgiving people of their sins and as he did. That would be really bad if somebody were trying to do that.
Yeah. So, Adam, what's kind of the central message for today?
I think the central message that we're trying to give is that there is always an authority over you. And, even if you're at the top of the chain, you still have God over you, whether you like it or not. Uh, God still created you. He still has the authority over you. There's always an authority over us, man or God. So we have to live the Christ-like manner to honor God. And if we are in a position of leadership, then we must lead and live in a way that glorifies God. Like I was saying, the qualities of a leader, we must make sure that we have those and that we are not over micromanaging or slacking on the job so as to disappoint those who follow us. Like I said earlier, all leaders will have to answer for their followers, for the lies that they told their followers, whether intentional or unintentionally. Like I said, those that lead people astray from the gospel will have to answer for that, and that will not be a pleasant experience. We must make sure that we are living in accordance with God's word.
Yeah, for sure, and that's kind of the bottom line. Hey, listen, great talk today. I think we're at our usual time stop, so we're not going to try to run you guys long. Hey, this has been Adam and Landon here on the Standout Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this. We hope you have a great day. Let us know in the comments below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, etc. Just let us know down there. We'll get back to you. We check those quite often. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And as I said, leave a comment. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. Helps grow the channel. Share this with your friends, anybody who would listen to it that you think they would enjoy it. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for next week when we finish up our series on fortune, fame, money, and power. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Adios.